Morning.
Morning to Jeannie as well.
Amen.
Well, no handout. Officially done with the book, at least according to me. 16 lessons. That's probably good enough. We got the point over and over again. I was trying to invent points from week to week. It wasn't the same point over and over again. He wrote a really good book. You know, I didn't personally even finish it. Kind of saw where it was going, read some chapter titles. But the point is that the subject matter is as important today as it ever has been. And that is to make sure that we're standing in the truth. We have to stand in the truth. We have to stand for something. Because if we don't stand for something, we're going to lose everything, as we found out, as we've been finding out. And so there's, Israel was called to be separate in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, they said, separate yourselves. There's multiple warnings from Christ himself to not be deceived in the last time. I mean, there's a million of those things. And that's what we need to hold on to. But so I think we got the point. I hope you got the point. And I'm kind of filling in for Pastor before I start taking Wednesday nights, and that'll be the Exodus study. Sister Tanya requested.
Will that be after the business meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's this coming Wednesday. If you want to do something, if not, that's fine. I can do something too.
Yeah, whenever you're ready to jump in,
Okay.
I can do the singles,
Okay. And I am going through Exodus in my personal studies, and that's kind of where this study is going to come from today. Not Exodus, Genesis. So if you'll turn with me over to Genesis chapter 37, we'll take a look at a couple scriptures today, and your comments are welcome, definitely. Love this topic of Joseph, is what we're going to be talking about. I know recently was going through looking at Joseph, the Bible. We're going to look at some scriptures, and then we're going to land there in chapter 50. So I don't like to just start a book. I like to kind of back up a little bit if I can. New Testament a little harder to do because it's letters, Old Testament flows a little bit more, especially the first 5 books, where it starts off with in the beginning and then ends with the last book that Moses wrote. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. I guess that'd be Deuteronomy. Okay. It doesn't end there because then it goes into Joshua and all that, but it does flow a little more, so you kind of have to grab the context even of the previous book. And I don't believe these were books when Moses wrote them. He said, "Okay, Genesis is done, chapter 50." So it's just one big volume, and then when he wrote those books, I don't know. Could have been sometime during the 40 years, maybe at the very end of his life. It would have to be, I would think, because he wrote about his death, or unless someone else finished that. We don't know.
Someone else would have had to finish that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But we do know that he wrote Genesis, and one of the things that the very last part of Genesis deals with a lot is Joseph in the land of Egypt. And so being in the land of Egypt, and we'll see that on Wednesdays pretty soon, but being in the land of Egypt, where did that get its start? Were they always slaves? No. Were they there because they were brought there as slaves? Well, sort of. Were they there with ill intent at first? No, they weren't. So we're going to see here where it got its start. And in Genesis chapter 37, we now see that Moses has covered, the Abraham and Isaac, and now Jacob. And now Jacob has had his 12 sons. But what was the one wife that he loved more than anybody else? Of all of the mothers of his 12 children, which one was the one that he loved the most?
Rachel.
It was Rachel. Wasn't it Rachel that he worked for from Laban? Wasn't it Rachel that he esteemed higher than anybody? Right? She's the one that he worked for and that he wanted. And so Joseph being the firstborn from Rachel. And so we see here, chapter 37, verse 1 says, "Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan." That's key. God had promised the promised land to Abraham. Abraham sojourned there and just kind of pitched his tent, moved around with the sheep or whatever, and just kind of followed him. He never really had a place to call his own. And so his sons didn't have a place to call it, or his son didn't have a place to call his own. And his grandson now didn't have a place to call his own. And now their sons don't have really a place to call their own. They're just strangers in the land. They're guests, as it were. Why are they guests? Because there's other nations that are there, and they're only getting stronger as the years go on, more entrenched, right? They're only getting to the point where they don't want to be moved. These people, this is their home. And God said, no, I'm going to give you this land, but in the meantime, you have to dwell in it as a stranger, and that's what Jacob's doing. So he says, this is the history of Jacob. Joseph being 70 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a tunic of many colors. We were talking last night about this. If there's one thing that differentiates somebody from something else, it's the attention that they get, right? And so Jacob already has these sons, right? They were sons from another mother, if you will, all right? They were brothers from another mother. And that is true, they were brothers from another mother. But at the same time, whereas, Reuben and Gad and Issachar and Asher and all these other sons of Jacob, they were all along just fine. Then Joseph comes along, being the son of the woman that, of his favorite wife, if you will, of the favorite mom. And comes into a situation now where the father is going to pay special attention to Joseph. If you want to make your brothers mad, you're going to have special attention paid by your dad, by your parents. And so he says, now Israel loved Joseph more than all of his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he also made him a tunic of many colors. Now, colors back then weren't you just go grab a spool off, from Joann's or something. Those were hard to make. Different colors took a lot of time, took a lot of different materials, raw materials, in order to spin up these many colors. That's why purple was so rare, because it was hard to make purple. But when his brothers saw that the father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. Joseph's not setting himself up here, is he, to make friends? Right? He's already got his father's attention more than the others. He has this special coat that I'm sure he wore all the time. Not necessarily to flaunt it, because we see Joseph's attitude later on, not much later on, that he's not the kind that's going to flaunt these things. He's just being honest. He didn't ask for his father to be, to show him special attention. He just was, right? He just was the son of Rachel. And so we see that now beyond this special coat, we see that Jacob now he's starting to have dreams. And we see that this is a reoccurrence later on, that he's able to interpret dreams. So God, from an early age, is using dreams with Joseph. And so he kind of introducing him to these things. So he told them, please hear the dream which I have dreamed. There he and his brothers, were binding sheaves in the field. That's when you take sheaves, you take, I don't know, I'm not a farmer. But you take bundles of wheat and you tie them up, right? Isn't that what a sheaf, isn't that, Noah? Sure. Okay. We got a sure from Noah. It's more than I was hoping to get.
That's one job I don't think he's ever done, so.
Okay. Okay. So you have all of these bundles of wheat, and they're all just kind of, standing around. Then behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. So now they're just, bundle it, you set it on the ground, and they're all laying there. All of a sudden his is now standing upright, and indeed, your sheaves all stood around, and now they're standing up. What's the difference? They bowed down to his sheaf. Uh-oh. Little brother, what are you doing? His brother said to him, shall you indeed reign over us? What are you doing with this dream? You shouldn't be having these dreams. You're just a little kid, right? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Could they hate him more? Could they possibly hate him more? We're going to see this hatred has wheels here in a minute, right? What they do with it.
Well, I was just thinking, this dream, it seems to go completely against what the established, pecking order was in that time.
Absolutely.
Of the oldest would
Firstborn.
take over
Yep.
after the father,
Yep.
over the family,
Yep.
and such.
Good point.
This second to youngest coming up, with this dream that he would be ruling over all the brothers. I think that not only in the sense of him being the favorite of their father, but also that established cultural idea of the oldest coming over the family until, of course, the brothers separated. I think that might have been a very large contributing factor to their hatred of him even more.
Yes, and I think what you're saying, and this is a good point, is that not only did it move beyond an annoyance that the father favored their brother, their little brother, moved beyond that and now into borderline blasphemy of how dare you rock the cultural establishment of what we have. And that establishment was the firstborn gets everything, and then, then from there, they flipped it around. Now the youngest is going to get everything? And you're telling me that the oldest is going to bow down to the youngest?
He's usurping all of his older brothers.
Exactly.
That was already in motion, I think, with the positions as far as the father's flocks. They were the ones, the older brothers were the ones that tend the flock.
Right.
Joseph was handed the clipboard.
Yeah.
We saw him, right away. There was a problem there.
Yeah. And there was issues.
Yeah, issues.
And we're going to see that just like Cain was jealous of Abel, what did he do about it? He didn't just let that happen. Right, Brother Brian? You know that one, right? All right. So we know that Cain wasn't satisfied just to say, okay, I guess I'll change my ways. No, he was angry. He was mad. His countenance fell. His face changed. Went out and killed it. Right? We're going to see that same kind of hatred here. Verse 9, then he dreamed still another dream, and he told it to his brothers. It's one thing to dream a dream. It makes your brothers angry. But he tells them another dream. And this dream is just as potent as the first one. So he says, and said, look, I have dreamed another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bow down to me. The 11 stars? Every one of his brothers? There's 12. All of them bowed down to him. Keep that in mind. And we're going to see that again. So he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said, what is this? That dream that you have dreamed, shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come and bow down to the earth before you? Keep that in mind. We all know the story. Right? That really did happen. And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. I love that. Because, remember when it said that about Mary? All these things happened. Jesus is just a little baby. And he's teaching in the temple in Christ. He was 12 years old. But Mary pondered these things. She's the one that just kind of kept him right here. They didn't just say, in and out. Done. I forgot about it. No, they kept them in their minds. I think that's God keeping things in our minds. There's certain events that happen, certain words that people say that will always be with us because we pondered them. We put them in our hearts. And they really do shape us too. Certain things and events that will always shape us. And I think God makes man meet moment, and the rest is history. And so, in the back of Jacob's mind, he's keeping these things in his mind, just like Mary had to keep these things in her heart.
You know what I see there, Andrew? I too, that verse just jumps out at me, doesn't it? Okay? I see that in his wisdom, he wasn't just locked in on the moment and the events. Okay, he was a man of, you can see greater vision. In other words, in the back of his mind, something bigger than this is happening
Right.
here, or going to happen.
Right.
He had this intuition, and so that's how I look at it.
Yeah. It's kind of like when Eli had gotten Samuel when he was only a little boy. And the first, at night, God woke him up basically and started speaking his name. He goes in there and says, "Yeah, what do you need, Eli? What do you need?" He said, "I didn't call you. Go back to bed." All right. He hears his name again. And then he said, "Okay, this is something going on here." You hear your name again, and that's God talking to you. And that's exactly what happened. He went from there. But his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. His brothers aren't going to let this go. But he even got a little rebuke from his dad, right? Lest he get a big head, or lest he, because his dad knew that there was going to be jealousy. His dad knew there was going to be strife between the brothers. And his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel, or Jacob, said to Joseph, are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. So he said to them, here I am. So now he says, your brothers are out there working, I need you to get out there with them. Could be a dangerous thing, right? I mean, there's an all-time high of hatred now for Joseph. And now his dad's going to send him out alone, wherever Shechem is, which I'm sure is far away. He's going to send them out. He's going to send him out as a sheep among wolves at this moment. Then he said to him, please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me. So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now a certain man found him, and there he was, wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, what are you seeking? So he said, I'm seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flocks. And the man said, they have departed from here, for I have heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. This isn't just let's give him a little Dutch rub on the head or something, turn him loose, just, jack up his pants and kick him, It's not one of those. Okay, give him a swirly, an ancient swirly with the well, or like that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the kind of hatred that Cain had for Abel. We're talking about that level of hatred to where you've moved beyond, I'm just going to hate him from the outside. You're going to do something about it now. All the brothers said this. All of them.
So what you're saying is this wasn't like the Maney house.
Right. Exactly. Never came to that. Close a couple times. But they conspired against him to kill him. So they saw him coming. He was still a ways away. They couldn't hear him. They all did a little huddle up, drew some plans in the sand, and drew up the play. They said to one another, look, this dreamer is coming. Right? They just, you can see they just don't value Joseph. They just hate him. They just hate him for his dreams. They hate him for his favoritism. They hate him for that coat that he's got on. He wears it everywhere. They just hate him. Right? You can feel it. Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams. So how can he bow down to you if you're dead? We're going to find out, what's going to happen to those silly dreams of his. But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands. Reuben being who? Eldest, right? Eldest had some wisdom. Yeah, did Reuben hate him? Absolutely, Reuben hated him. But he didn't want to hate him enough to kill him. So he says, let us not kill him. And it says, and Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands, and bring him back to his father. So it came to pass when Joseph had come to his brothers that they stripped Joseph of his tunic. You can imagine that scene. Right? His brothers getting very physical with him, ripping a jacket off of him, and that he is not going to willingly give that up. The tunic of many colors that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into a pit. And the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. Had there been water in it, he would have drowned. There's no holes in him, grab hand on the side of this thing. I'm sure he just would have drowned.
Well, and being over there, it more than likely was very warm. Also,
Yeah.
probably just kind of cooked down in there.
He probably would have, and there would have been no. I mean, he would have died somehow. He would have died had there been, water in it. But as it was, he threw him into a pit that was empty, and they sat down to eat a meal. Man, got rid of him. Who's hungry? Right? Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balm and myrrh, on their way to carry them down to Egypt. Not the first mention of Egypt in Genesis, but certainly revolving around the Jews being in Egypt. This was the first time, right? Because Abraham went down to Egypt, didn't he? But we're not talking about that. We're talking about, this is the first mention of Egypt and the Jews actually living down there. So Judah said to his brothers, what profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. Ishmaelites being their relatives, right? And let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brothers listened. Judah stepped in and delivered it. Once again, we see that Christ from the line of Judah did the same thing. Then Midianite traders passed by, so the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit. and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. There's so many parallels between Joseph and Jesus. So many parallels. We're not even going to get into that today. Well, almost not. Then Reuben returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit, and tore his clothes. And he returned to his brothers and said, the lad is no more, and I, where shall I go? So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the tunic in blood. Right? I don't even need to say anything about all this. Then they sent the tunic of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, we have found this. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not? And so the story is that Joseph, fast forward a little bit, but his father was beside himself. Whitney was in mourning for his son. I mean, just absolutely obliterated by this event. It's his son that he loved, his favorite son. The Bible doesn't hide that fact, that this was his favorite son. And the fact that his brothers would do harm to him. So much harm. Their intentions were to kill him, backed off of it a little bit. Let's just get rid of him. What's going to become of your dreams, you know? Well, they didn't want him around. They wanted to ruin his life, if you will. They wanted to put a stop to his dreams. They wanted to put a stop to his life. And they wanted him gone. And they got their wish. No more Joseph. He left the land. He's in Egypt now. Well, the Bible now focuses the next couple of chapters on Joseph. Of course, we know all about the being sold into the house of a rich Egyptian named Potiphar, and how Joseph was a righteous man. Nothing unrighteous about Joseph. He was put in charge of all of Potiphar's servants, all of his finances, everything that Joseph was put in charge of. Everything prospered. Very, very wealthy, very prosperous. He made his master very wealthy and very prosperous. And if it wasn't for, his wife kind of being a sleazeball, Joseph would probably have stayed there. But as God would have it, he got, in trouble, wrongfully accused of something he didn't do. And now the next stop for Joseph is prison. Now, does this story sound familiar to you? It does. All right. Good. Awesome. I love the story. And I just love hearing it and saying it for the first time. And so now he's in prison. And so we see here that what's going to get him out of prison? What did God work with him in the beginning? Dreams. Who has a dream? Pharaoh has a dream. So now he's in Egypt. Pharaoh's the king. Pharaoh has a dream that none of his magicians or anybody else can interpret. And the one person that remembered that Joseph could interpret dreams was with him in prison. It's been restored now back to his duties next to the king. And he whispers in the king's ear, says, I know somebody that can probably help you out. And I was with him in prison. All right, worth a shot. Bring him up here. What did he do? He said exactly what would happen. Verse 14, let's go to 41, verse 14. It says, then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon, and he shaved, changed his clothes, and came to Pharaoh. Got to look presentable for the king, right? And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it, but I have heard that it said of you, that you can understand a dream to interpret it. He's getting pretty desperate if he's calling you prisoner. What you think? The prisoner. It says, so Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not me. Remember, this is what Daniel said too. And Christ always deferred to his father. It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Pharaoh's, God? Who's that? It sounds like you're pretty definitive about a God. Not many gods, or the moon god, or the sun god, or the Amun-Ra, or whoever. He's saying God. And when you say God, you're saying you're all encompassing. The one God. The one God who made everything. He will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, behold, in my dream I stood on the bank of a river. Suddenly 7 cows came up out of the river, fine looking and fat, and they fed in the meadow. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and gaunt, such ugliness as I have never seen in all the land of Egypt. So, fast forward to the interpretation is that these 7 fat cows represented 7 years of plentiful. What do you do when things are plentiful? Typically, when food is just everywhere, you pig out, right? Oh, this is wonderful. I'm just gonna go do whatever I want. Look at all these 7 wonderful years of plenty. I'm just gonna take advantage of it. That's what we want to do instinctively, right? Joseph said, no, Pharaoh, you've got to prepare. Because there's gonna come 7 years of famine. See, that's what everybody didn't know. He put Egypt on the map when everybody else around Egypt had to come and buy from Egypt. He made them very wealthy if they weren't already, even more wealthy. And he made them the go-to place. And so, because God used Joseph's wisdom and gave him the interpretation, Egypt now was in a much better situation than anybody else. And while Egypt said, we're gonna ration our food as if there's not a whole lot of food, we're gonna take the food just enough to eat, and we're gonna store it. And everyone else is loving it, because there's been 7 good years of plenty. But what God revealed to Joseph was that there was gonna be 7 years of famine. Famine means there's no food. Doesn't mean a little food, there's no food. What do you do when there's no food? I was telling kids, I said, we go to Costco, we go to Walmart, we go to Missoula Fresh, we buy food every couple weeks, it's like we all do. What happens when we run out of food? We don't grow food. Slaughter animals, right? I don't know how to do that stuff. I've seen it on TV. But we would have to do what? Go out of our city to go buy more food if Missoula stopped having food. The supermarkets just decided to shut down tomorrow. What would you do? Right? Well, that's exactly what happened. And so meanwhile, when Joseph's brothers and Jacob and all the wives there, when they were enjoying the years of plenty, Egypt's enjoying the years of plenty, but they're storing up. What happens when there's a famine? Everybody around them is affected except for Egypt. So what happens is Jacob says, go out and get food. We need food. Everybody came to Egypt, and I guarantee you there was a lot of deaths around that area. And so they all sent to Egypt. They said, well, we've heard there's food down in Egypt. Little did they know whose idea that was, right? Or who made that happen. And so, verse 37 and 41 says, so the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all of his servants to store up this food for the future. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such a one as this? A man in whom is the Spirit of God. What a confession from a man who is considered a deity himself. And even they have to acknowledge eventually that it is God's power. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, inasmuch as God has shown you all of this, there is no one as discerning and as wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all the people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne I will be greater than you, which means that you can't inherit the throne. That has to stay in the family. But other than that, you're it. Everybody has to answer to you. That's how powerful that he made it. So my subtitle says Joseph's rise to power. I'd say that's a rise to power. Unlike anyone's ever seen. From prison one day, second in command of one of the greatest military mights in the country at the time. And so, keep in mind though that while all this is going on, Jacob still believes that his son is dead. His brothers still believe that he's gone off somewhere, he's a prisoner, he's a slave. At least we got rid of him. He's not going to have those dreams anymore. We got tired of listening to him. We got tired of his favoritism. He's gone. We ruined your life, Joseph. Right? And that's what they wanted to do. And so, we see, and then of course we fast forward a little bit more, and Jacob sends the rest of the brothers down to Egypt. They meet with a very, very Egyptian-looking Joseph. They didn't even recognize him. Joseph recognized him. He knew exactly who they were. And what did he do? He met with them, and he had to go out of the room and he cried his eyes out. And then he came back in the room, after he had composed himself, and he said, "Okay, you guys can have food now." And so, of course, Jacob now has become, the father has now become very overprotective of Benjamin. Benjamin being the other son of Rachel, right? And I believe Rachel died in childbirth, I could be wrong. But giving birth to Benjamin, he wouldn't even let Benjamin go down there until Joseph, the Egyptian, for all intents and purposes to the brothers, said, "No, bring down your other brother. I want to see him," because that's his full brother. So he came down and he saw him, and it's just this flood of emotion now, because there's been several years that have passed. So we see here now that Joseph finally revealed himself, said, "I'm your brother," and they embraced him. Right, that was a very emotional scene. He forgave them, right? But in the back of their mind, the brothers, the back of their mind, they're thinking, all right, maybe he's just being nice to us because Dad's around. Maybe he's just doing these things because he wants to not put Dad through heartache again. What happens when Dad dies? What's going to happen then? Well, let's take a look. Chapter 50.
Father, may you live forever.
Yeah, exactly. Verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "Perhaps Joseph will hate us and may actually repay us for all the evil which we did to him." You think they forgot about what they did to him? You think Joseph forgot about what they did to him? They're panicking now. Because guess who just died? Their dad just died. And now they're thinking, no more, barrier, no more buffer guy, right? There's a possibility that he's going to treat us evil now that Dad's gone. So they sent messengers to him. So they sent messengers to Joseph saying, "Before your father died, he commanded, saying, you need to be nice to your brothers." To paraphrase, you need to forgive them. And he says, "Thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespasses of your brothers and their sin." This was the just in case thing, right? "For they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespasses of the servants of the God of your father." Remember, they're your servants. They're servants of God too. And Joseph wept when he spoke to them. And here's the crux of the lesson this morning on Joseph. It says, "Then his brothers also went." So not only did they send the messenger, but now they're going to appear in person. "And they fell down before their face." What does that sound like? Do you think Joseph was kneeling down or sitting? Doesn't that sound like the bundles of wheat?
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound like the 11 stars?
Right.
They fell down on their face. This happened previously when they went to go beg for food too. But they fell down on their face, and they said, "Behold, we are your servants." Wow. Take those words they said before, "you dreamer," and just eat them, right?
You think that if they remembered the bad they did to him, they remembered his dream.
Yep.
And how they chided him.
Yeah.
They
I
remembered
think
all
they
of
did.
it.
I think they did. I think they understood all of it. And everything came full circle, didn't it? His brothers went and fell down and said, "We are your servants." And Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid." You can sense the tension in the room, the panic, if you will, with these brothers. What's Joseph, what are you going to do to us now? You have all the power in the world to do whatever you want to us. And no one's going to say anything. It's your decision to make, whether we live or whether we die. And that's their thinking. But Joseph said to them, so many parallels between he and Jesus. He says, "Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God?" Your decisions that you made in life, that's your judgment. He said, I'm not going to get involved in that. God's going to make that decision. Whether you live or die, that's up to God. Your judgment, it's not in my hands. It's not for me to decide that. This is what I love, verse 20. It says, "But as for you, you meant evil against me." Was there any doubt about that? Was there any doubt that when they wanted to kill him, there was evil intention? When they wanted to blaspheme him, there was evil intention? When they threw him in the pit, when they sold him, they wanted to ruin his life. He says, I'm not going to just excuse everything. You guys put me here because you wanted to ruin my life. You had evil intentions for me. But God meant it for good. If only we could look back at our lives and say, why did that happen? Why did that happen? Because God meant it for good. It's pretty raunchy that day when he got sold into slavery. Pretty raunchy when he got blackmailed by his master's wife. But he looked back and said, everything worked out for what? Together for the good of God. I love God. So, I guess my thing is that we can see calamity come in our lives, and there's calamity ahead. I guarantee it for me, for our family, for each of us here, there's gonna be calamity. But we need to look back at that situation and we say, Lord, we can look back at it now and say, Lord, you meant it for good. If for nothing else, he put Joseph there in Egypt. It was a horrible way that he got there. But he put him there so he could save thousands of people and keep the covenant of God alive, which is what he did. He kept and preserved the covenant people. They weren't storing up. They were just eating the food year by year. They didn't have the wisdom that God gave to Joseph. They were just going to die. Do you think that anyone could have come to Egypt if they hadn't stored up food? Egypt would have been in the same boat. There would have been famine. There would have been widespread death. God put him there, and that's exactly what he says. He says, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is today, as it is this day, to save many people alive. So we don't really know when a situation happens to us and it looks bad on the outside. We don't know what God can bring of that. We don't know what good can come of that. And so for us to dismiss a situation and say that was all bad, I think that's dangerous. I think we need to recognize, and it is difficult to do it at the time. You want to squeeze someone's neck when you're going through a trial. But at the time it's tough, but as we can look back, can't we see a road that God has put us on and kept us through? Would it have been the road that we drew up? I don't think so. I think Joseph would have said, I want to be thrown into prison, I want to be sold as a slave. He wouldn't have done that. Nobody in their right mind chooses those things. But God chose it for Joseph. And God chooses our path too, if we follow him. We can veer off that path. Right? But is that what God wants us to do? You know, Peter and James said, we have through many tribulations entered the kingdom of God. If we're not going through tribulations, if we have it rosy-dozy, and there's going to be years and times that we do have little or no tribulation. It's tough to stay faithful in those times too. So it's not like it's, easy, right? Years of plenty can make you complacent. But at the same time, it's bad for us to just dismiss a bad time, what looks like a bad time on the outside. Say, Lord, that situation is just worthless. It's not worthless. Joseph was put there by God at that time for so many reasons.
I was just going to say that in this story, we don't see a violation at all of the principle of suffering before glory.
Right.
So you're right, all the things you mentioned that he went through was all of the suffering package, specifically designed for him,
Yeah.
but not more than he can handle. Okay? He didn't go crazy in prison.
Right.
He became the chief prisoner. He was given responsibility. He was the manager over the prisoners. So he didn't go crazy or lose it.
Yeah.
And then the glory came with being the second in command.
Yeah.
How long was he in prison? Was it 2 years?
Was it three? Was it 3 years?
It was,
Seven. 3?
because he was in the prison for something like, I think, a year. Yeah, so it was at least 3, maybe 4. Because he was, after the prisoners got out, or the other 2 after his vision, he was in there for another 2 years.
That would pretty much correlate with Jesus' ministry and the hostility again that his brother had. His ministry was one of conflict.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of parallels. I think you brought a lesson out one time on that. So he says here, in verse 21, now therefore do not be afraid, I will provide for you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So just when they were trembling on their knees, laying face down on the floor, expecting the worst, Joseph says, no, I'm not going to do that. You wanted evil for me, God wanted the best for me, it all worked out. And I'm going to provide for your little ones. There's plenty of food here, you guys come down here and live. And so, it speaks about how he was able to see his children's children, and he died. But before he died, verse 25 says, and Joseph took an oath from the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. That's a prophecy, isn't it? Little did he know that it would be 400 years later. Israel now was just multiplying like crazy inside Egypt. They couldn't even contain them, all the people. But he said, this was the initial, while the patriarchs were still alive. He said, God's going to visit you guys. He didn't know all the things that would happen, and that Egypt would turn on them, they would turn them to slaves, and it would make their lives miserable. But he understood enough in faith to say, God's not going to leave you down here. He's going to bring you back to that promise. And that's exactly what sets us up for Exodus. You know, the stories there.
Everyone's gotta pay their dues. And in order to get the promised land, Israel had to pay their dues. You know, their suffering and then the inheritance. So the pattern is just amazing. You see it.
Over and over and over again. And it's different, but it's the same. It's specifically different for everybody, but at the same time, the principle's there. You know, that we're gonna have to go through trials to get there. God wants us to make sure that we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else?
Amen.
All right. Let's go ahead and dismiss.